G'day, I'm Mark Latham, and the Australian media is full of the debate about legislating for same-sex marriage. But what is the truth that underlies this debate? I'll be talking about that. Well, we've had the vote in Australia about same-sex marriage, and now the Parliament is trying to put in place the laws. But wow, there's a lot of MPs who've led people down the garden path. For instance, the Turnbull government sponsored a $100 million public vote on same-sex marriage, and 61% of Australians who voted said yes. But the Turnbull government is not sponsoring its own legislation. Why? Well, it didn't want in the voting process for the no campaigners to get their teeth into the issue, the whole question of religious freedom. So people were asked to sign off, vote for a blank cheque. Nobody knew what sort of legislation would follow this vote. It was a political trick. The fix was in between Labor and Liberal from the very beginning. And unfortunately, it now seems certain we won't have adequate protection of religious freedom. For instance, have a look at this senator, Labor leader in the Senate, Penny Wong. She has said that consideration of an international covenant covering religious freedoms, that's too complicated and complex. Really? A legislator saying it's all too big for her pea brain to get its mind around, too complicated and complex. And on the Liberal side, the sponsor of the original legislation for same-sex marriage, WA Senator Dean Smith, here he is, Dean Smith, he's saying he's expecting the full weight of the law to apply to any Christian, any Muslim I suppose, any religious objector who doesn't want to participate commercially through their business with same-sex marriage ceremonies. So just think about that for a moment. This guy, who's supposed to be a Liberal, believes that the power of government, the power of the state should be there to coerce people and force them into doing things they regard as morally wrong. Okay? People should have the right to refuse to do things that they regard as morally wrong in a free society. That's how it should operate. So this has been a sham debate, a sham process from the very beginning. It has no legitimacy, and unfortunately there's already evidence in Australia that Christians, even Muslims, normally poster boys and girls of the left-wing activists, that these religious believers, because of their religious faith, in most cases valid religious faith, they're going to be persecuted simply for believing in their God of worship. Now, it's a bad situation, and we know it's going to happen because we've already seen an appalling instance of it in the state of Western Australia. It concerned Margaret Court. Margaret Court, a tennis legend, she's won more Grand Slam singles titles than any other person in the history of the game. Here she is in action. Margaret Court, a magnificent player, a legend in Australian sporting history. There she is in the 1971 Australian Open final against Yvonne Goolagong. And Margaret Court, since then, what's she been doing? Well, she's found service of a different kind, and she's been at the Victory Life Church in Perth in Western Australia as a pastor. They do the things that the left activists used to do, actually meet the poor and help them in person. And every year, her mission there, the church of which she's a pastor, helps over 10,000 needy families in and around Perth with food parcels, health services and counselling. So she is a magnificent Australia. She's always dignified, but her current crime in the public debate, she's a Christian. And there's been all sorts of abuse of Margaret Court. In late May, she wrote a letter to the Western Australian newspaper saying she wouldn't be flying with the Qantas airline anymore because of its support for same-sex marriage. Well, that's her choice in a free society, but the abuse and intimidation she copped since that statement has been horrendous. Indeed, here's the key thing. Look at this letter. In early June, the John Forrest Secondary College, headed up by the chairperson of the board, Dr. Megan Lloyd, sent a letter to Margaret Court. Margaret Court had been a patron of the specialist tennis program, the tennis academy, at this government school in Perth, John Forrest Secondary College. And Lloyd writes at the top of the letter as follows: "The community appreciates the time you've given out of your busy schedule to attend tennis presentations and events involving our college, and to share your tennis wisdom in talks with our students." It rightly points out that Margaret Court was a magnificent tennis player and she speaks with authority on tennis matters, and our students have greatly benefited. Well, you wouldn't normally think in being a patron and a mentor at a tennis academy that religion and politics would have anything to do with hitting the ball over the net, okay, with the volley, with the serve, with the overhead, the forehand, the backhand, okay? It's the game of tennis, but these lefties, they think everything is political. So the Star Chamber test comes in the remainder of the letter. Have a look at it from Megan Lloyd. She's talking about inclusivity, but she's trying to exclude Margaret Court from involvement at the school. And the final paragraph is the key. We ask you to confirm that your views align to those of our college and will allow you to be promoted to our students as someone who values diversity and inclusivity, is accepting of race and cultural difference, and will happily accept people with different sexual identity. That is, it's not just a matter of someone like Margaret Court who loves all people and wants to support all people, respecting homosexuality and same-sex marriage. She has to embrace it and accept it and believe in it to be part of a school environment. Now, this is just dreadful. We've seen in other countries people excluded from the education system because they're not worshipping at the new secular deity of homosexuality and same-sex marriage. The guy in Britain who has been kicked out of a social work course in university because he's a Christian. And that's been confirmed by the British High Court. So this terrible pattern overseas is coming to Australia. In fact, it's already here. Margaret Court effectively excluded from the college there and the tennis academy at the government school in Perth because of her legitimate, well-founded, strongly held beliefs in the nuclear family, in Christian values, in heterosexual relationships, and her support for traditional male-female marriage. We can't allow our country to become like this. And the worst thing about this letter, of course, it was endorsed by the State Labor Education Minister, Sue Ellery. Here's a picture of Sue Ellery endorsing this letter. So you've got an education minister in the system who now believes it's acceptable to kick people out of schools, a sporting academy, because of their religious and political beliefs. This is a policy of exclusion. Forget about all the social justice bullcrap about inclusivity. This is exclusion. And of course, it's no coincidence that on the school board at John Forrest, there's this representative, Lisa Baker, another Labor Member of Parliament, Lisa Baker, an openly gay politician in Western Australia. So it's more than hypothetical. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, there won't be much persecution of Christians, if any, because the gays are tolerant. We won't have all these cases about the tailor, the baker, the ringmaker, the limousine driver and the like. But it's just as bad. It's already happening. People excluded from the education system because of their valid beliefs. We can't allow this to happen. We need rigorous protections of religious freedom so that people aren't forced against their will to participate in things they regard quite validly as morally wrong. That's not a free society. That's not the Australia I know and love. We need to do better than that, and I'm afraid this age of persecuting Christians is now upon us. I'm Mark Latham for Rebel Australia. And if you like that video, please share it with your family and friends on social media and support our campaign against lawfare and anti-white racism. Standwithlatham.com.